Shibli Sadiq Hridoy lived with his parents in Chattogram, Bangladesh, where they faced economic challenges. His father worked as a truck driver with irregular income, while his mother was a kind homemaker. Despite their financial difficulties, his father prioritized Sadiq's education, and Sadiq was determined not to waste his father's hard work. Aware of his family's situation, Sadiq aspired to succeed and elevate his family's status in society. With strong determination, Sadiq studied diligently, and after graduating in 2021, decided to continue his education at a college in Kadalpur, about 24 kilometers from his hometown. He commuted by bus daily, and to ease his parents' burden, worked while attending college. Sadiq found a job at a chicken farm near his campus. He quickly adapted, earning his boss's trust due to his honesty. Gradually, he began supporting his family with his earnings. Thanks to his hard work, honesty, and initiative, Sadiq was promoted to manager at the farm, even though he was only 20 years old. This caused some jealousy among his older colleagues. As a manager, Sadiq was responsible for supervising his co-workers. He was strict when he noticed any wrongdoing, including when some colleagues stole chicken feed to sell secretly. Sadiq firmly reprimanded them, but they continued their actions. In June 2023, more chicken feed went missing, and Sadiq once again confronted 6 of his colleagues. He even threatened to report the theft to their boss. Feeling insulted, the 6 men resisted, and the situation nearly escalated until their boss intervened. However, after listening to his mother's advice to forgive his colleagues, Sadiq decided not to report the incident. Still, his co-workers harbored resentment and planned to kidnap him. On August 28, 2023, one of them, Umong Ching, tried to lure Sadiq away from work. When Sadiq refused because he was busy, Umong Ching called his 5 accomplices, who were waiting in a car. Wearing masks, they kidnapped Sadiq. Despite resisting, Sadiq was overpowered as they beat him and dragged him into the car. Inside, they vented their anger by beating him until he was weak. They then took him to a house in the Dalachari Hills, where Sadiq was held captive for several days. Meanwhile, at home, Sadiq's parents grew increasingly anxious as he hadn't returned and no news came. His phone, which had been reachable earlier, was no longer answered, heightening their worry. Sadiq's father initially thought he might be working late, but their concern grew as time passed. His father asked his mother to remain patient, but when Sadiq had not returned by the next day, and there was no news, their anxiety grew. As a result, Sadiq's father immediately went to the chicken farm where Sadiq worked. However, the workers there had no idea where Sadiq was. Later that afternoon, Sadiq's mother was startled by a phone call from Sadiq. When she answered, Sadiq spoke haltingly, saying he had been kidnapped. But in the middle of the conversation, the call was suddenly cut off. His parents tried calling back, but there was no answer, increasing their worry. They decided to report the kidnapping to the police. Before they could leave, another call came from Sadiq's phone. This time, a different man's voice was heard, claiming to be the kidnapper. The kidnapper demanded a ransom of 1.5 million taka, or about $13,700, to release Sadiq unharmed. He also threatened them not to involve the police if they wanted Sadiq to stay alive. After the call ended, Sadiq's parents were left speechless and desperate. With their difficult financial situation, they felt it was impossible to gather such a large amount of money, but they couldn't bear the thought of losing Sadiq. Sadiq's father began selling whatever they could and reached out to relatives and friends to borrow money. After 2 days of effort, the amount they had gathered was still far from enough, leaving them increasingly anxious. Despite this, they didn't dare contact the police, fearing for Sadiq's safety. Amid their distress, the kidnappers called again, using Sadiq's phone. Sadiq's father answered immediately, and the kidnappers suggested a meeting place to exchange Sadiq for the ransom. Since the ransom hadn't been fully collected, Sadiq's father begged for more time. The kidnappers gave them 4 more days. After 4 days, they called again, and Sadiq's father pleaded to lower the ransom. He explained their financial struggles, and the kidnappers agreed to reduce the ransom to 200,000 taka, or about $1,800. Though this amount was still difficult to gather, their neighbors, who knew Sadiq's family as good people, helped raise the money. Finally, the ransom was collected. Sadiq's father then contacted the kidnappers to inform them that the money was ready. The kidnappers instructed him to come alone to the Bandarban area the following afternoon and not to involve the police for Sadiq's safety. On September 4th, Sadiq's father went to the agreed location, carrying the ransom. Once there, he contacted the kidnappers to let them know of his arrival. Soon after, two masked men approached and asked for the money. At first, Sadiq's father hesitated because they didn't have Sadiq with them, but the kidnappers assured him that Sadiq was being brought home. Trusting their words, Sadiq's father handed over the ransom. Sadiq's father returned home feeling relieved, imagining that he would soon reunite with his son. However, when he arrived, Sadiq had not returned. They waited late into the night, but there was still no sign of him. When they tried calling Sadiq's phone, they found the number had been deactivated. This left them confused and deeply worried. Too frightened to go to the police, they waited for 3 days, but there was still no news of Sadiq. Finally, with heavy hearts, Sadiq's parents gathered the courage to report their son's kidnapping to the police. There, they explained everything that had happened. Upon hearing their story, the police were both shocked and somewhat disappointed that Sadiq's parents had only just reported the incident. They questioned why they had chosen to follow the kidnappers' demands. The police quickly formed an investigation team to look into Sadiq's disappearance. They began by questioning everyone close to Sadiq, including his parents. It was during this time that Sadiq's mother recalled her son once mentioning issues with his colleagues at work. The police immediately went to Sadiq's workplace. According to the owner of the chicken farm, Sadiq had indeed been involved in a conflict with 6 of his colleagues who had coincidentally stopped coming to work, including Sadiq. This information made the police more suspicious of the 6 men. After identifying them, the police tracked down their residences, but all had fled. News of Sadiq's disappearance quickly spread, shocking the community. Everyone was curious about what had happened. Nearly a month later, on September 10th, 2023, Sadiq's 6 colleagues were arrested while hiding at Patenga Beach. They were interrogated separately, and after several days, one by one, they began to confess. They admitted that their initial intention was to kidnap Sadiq out of resentment toward him for his role as the new manager. After abducting him, they took him to a house in the Dalukari Hills where they wore masks. There, they treated Sadiq harshly and called his parents to demand a ransom. However, when one of them, Umong Ching, accidentally removed his mask, Sadiq caught a glimpse of his face. Fearing that Sadiq would report them, they decided to end his life tragically. After receiving the ransom, they resolved to solve the problem by killing Sadiq. They dumped his body in the forest, but out of fear of discovery, they later retrieved it, dismembered it, and, in an attempt to cover their tracks, cooked the body parts and scattered his bones in various locations throughout the forest. The news of Sadiq's kidnapping and tragic fate shocked the local community. When the perpetrators were taken for a reconstruction of the crime, hundreds of angry locals stopped the police car and attempted to drag the culprits out. The police tried to protect them, but the crowd was overwhelming. Umong Ching was pulled from the vehicle and beaten to death by the mob, while the remaining 5 suspects were secured. In court, the 5 perpetrators were sentenced to death without leniency. Although this punishment brought some relief to the community, for Sadiq's parents, the loss of their kind and successful son left a wound that would never fully heal. What are your thoughts on this case? What lessons can be learned from it? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and see you in the next case.